Okay, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to another lesson in Mathematics 9. And we are now in the third week of the fourth quarter. So, if we try to recall our discussion for the past 2 weeks, we have discussed the six basic trigonometric ratio or the six basic trigonometric function: the sine, cosine, tangent, cotangent, secant, and cosecant. We also have discussed the six trigonometric ratio of special right triangle, such as the 30, 60, 90 degrees right triangle and the 45, 45, 90 degrees triangle. For this week, we're going to discuss another topic, which is the angle of elevation, or the angle of elevation and the angles of depression. We will try to define and illustrate what an angle of elevation is and what an angle of depression is. And after that, after illustrating these two types of angles formed, then we will now identify the parts of this angle. Okay, another thing is we're going to differentiate the two. So what are the difference between angle of elevation and angle of depression? So what are the things that makes this angle an angle of elevation and what makes this angle an angle of depression? Okay, so let's start our discussion. Okay, so in order to understand this topic, we need first to have the definition of the terms involved in the discussion. Okay. So the first terms that we need to define is the line of sight. Okay, the line of sight is being defined as an imaginary line that connects the eye of an observer to the object being observed. Okay, so there is that imaginary line from our eyes towards that object. Okay. And in this line of sight, if we try to look at the illustration, this is the eye of the observer. For example, ikaw, nakatayo ka dito sa floor, and this is your eye. Okay, so this is your eye, or two eyes. Yeah. And try to remember that the location of the eye is always the vertex of the angles form. Yan. Kung napapansin nyo, meron siyang mga angles na na-form. And this is the vertex of the angle. And this is always the location of the eye of the observer. Okay. Way back to the topic, line of sight, there are three terms related to the line of sight. Okay, the first one is the broken line here from the eye horizontally. This is called the horizontal line of sight. Okay, so horizontal line of sight. There is always that imaginary eye, or there is always that imaginary line from our eyes horizontally going to that position. For example, if I am sitting here and I am looking at the wall, I am facing the wall, and there is an object located at that wall. horizontally into my eyes. Okay, so that imaginary line from my eyes towards that object is called the horizontal line of sight. Okay. And for example, if I try to, or if we try to change location, for example, pumunta kayo sa rooftop ng bahay nyo, or ng mataas na building, and you just stand there, tumayo kayo doon, tapos tumingin kayo ng diretso towards the horizon, kung ano mang bagay yung nandun, then there is that imaginary line from our eyes horizontally towards that objects, kung meron mga objects doon. Pero kung wala namang object doon, it's okay, basta there is an imaginary line. So, that is the horizontal line of sight. Okay. Another term related to the line of sight is the line of sight above the observer. Okay. Okay, again, dito sa horizontal line of sight, kapag same yung height ng eyes natin, tsaka yung object. Halimbawa, yung eyes natin is 5 centimeters above the floor. Okay. And yung object na naandun sa wall, 5 centimeters din above the floor. Kaya magkakaroon ng horizontal line kapag same yung height ng mata mo tsaka yung object na tinitingnan mo. Okay. Magkaka-form ng horizontal line. Pero, kapag yung tinitingnan mo ay nasa taas, mas mataas kesa sa'yo. For example, nakatayo ka sa rooftop, tapos tinignan nyo yung mga stars na nasa sky. Or halimbawa, may birds na lumilipad doon sa sky, tinignan nyo. Or halimbawa, pag merong airplane na dumaan, tapos bigla kayong napatingin doon. Then, that imaginary line from our eyes towards that object na nasa sky ay tinatawag na yan na line of sight above the observer. Okay. Magkakaroon ng line of sight above the observer kapag ang tinitingnan mo ay mas mataas kesa sa'yo. Halimbawa, ikaw ay 5 meters above the floor, yung eyes mo. Tapos, yung tinitingnan mo is 100 meters above the floor. Okay, so magkakaroon na dyan ng line of sight above the observer. Okay. So, another term is the line of sight below the observer. Ito naman kapag yung tinitingnan mo ay nasa baba. For example, nakatayo ako dito, tapos tumingin ako doon sa floor din. So, di ba yung floor, ka-level siya ng paa ko. Okay. Yung floor, ka-level siya ng paa ko, tapos yung my eyes is above, nasa taas siya. So, kapag tumingin ako dun sa baba, makaka-form ng imaginary line of sight. And that is the imaginary line of sight below the observer. Okay. That also happens kapag, halimbawa, umakyat tayo sa rooftop, tapos meron doong mga kotse na dumaraan sa kalsada. For example, napatingin tayo doon. Then, there is that imaginary line from our eyes na nandun tayo nakatayo sa rooftop towards that kalsada or road, doon sa mga sasakyang dumaraan. So, ayan yung pinagkaiba ng tatlong line of sight. For example, dito sa location ko, nakaupo ako dito, tapos doon sa ka-level ng mata ko, nakikita ko yung electric fan. Ayan. So, if there is that imaginary line from my eyes towards that electric fan, then meron siyang horizontal line or horizontal line of sight. Then, pag tumingin ako sa taas, makikita ko yung lamp. Meron siyang lamp doon sa ceiling. Therefore, if there is a line from my eyes towards doon sa, or papunta doon sa lamp, then magkakaroon ng line of sight above the observer. Okay. Then, kapag tumingin naman ako dito sa baba, makikita ko yung box ng printer. Okay, box ng printer. Nandun siya nakapatong sa floor. Okay, so if there is that imaginary line from my eyes towards those box, okay, ang line na yun ay tatawagin na nating line of sight below the observer. Okay, ayan. Ayan, so eto, kapag ka-level ng eye, yung tinitingnan mo, horizontal line of sight. Kapag nasa taas, line of sight above the observer, and then, kapag titingin ka sa baba, that is line of sight below the observer. Next, the angle of elevation and the angle of depression. The angle of elevation is the angle from the horizontal to the line of sight of the observer to the object above. Okay. As you can observe in the illustration, this is the horizontal line of sight. And kapag meron siyang object dito sa taas, for example, meron siyang airplane sa part na yan, ito yung mata ko, nakatingin ako sa airplane. Then, yung angle na mapo-form from that horizontal line of sight papunta doon sa airplane, etong angle na mapo-form. So, this is the angle of elevation. Okay. So, ang tatandaan nyo lang dito sa angle of elevation, angle siya. So, ito yung angle na yun ang tinutukoy. Itong angle na ito. This angle. Okay. So, ang isa niyang ray, yung horizontal line of sight, tapos yung another ray, yung nasa taas. Okay. Horizontal, tsaka sa taas, makaka-form tayo ng angle of elevation. Okay. So, angle of depression naman is the angle from the horizontal to the line of sight of the observer to the object below. Okay. Ito naman yung angle of depression. Etong angle na to. Ayan. Yung angle na yan. So, na-form yung angle na yan because of the ray, yung line natin from the eye to the horizontal portion. And then, yung another line from the eyes pababa. So, ang tawag naman dyan ay angle of depression. Kapag yung angle ay pababa, angle of depression. Kapag yung angle ay nasa taas, angle of elevation. So, ang lagi natin titingnan ay yung horizontal line of sight. So, yan yung ating reference lagi. Okay. Ito yung ating reference. Kapag nasa baba yung isang ray, ang mapo-form angle of depression. Kapag nasa taas yung isang ray, ang ma-form ay angle of elevation. Okay, so let's have some example. Ayan. So I have here the figure. This is a building. And sabi ko nga kanina, ito yung angle na na-form, oh. Ayan. So sabi ko kanina, yung vertex ng angle, yan ang laging magiging location ng eye of the observer. So, ibig sabihin yan, yung taong nakatingin ay nandito sa taas ng building. Okay, nandito nakatayo yung tao sa taas ng building. Tapos, eto yung straight line, horizontal straight line from the eye of the observer papunta doon sa portion, naka-level lang ng mata niya. So, straight lang ng mata niya doon. Okay. Then, kung napapansin nyo, okay, so eto, since eto yung straight horizontal line, and that is ray OA. So, yan ang ilalagay natin dito sa table. Horizontal line of sight is ray OA. Okay, lagi tayo magsisimula dito sa O, doon sa mata, sa may eye of the observer. Yun lagi yung letter na una nating babanggitin, yung nasa mata, O. So that is O, A. Ray, OA. Okay, ayan. So, that is the horizontal line of sight. Hindi naman kayo malilito dito kasi kita naman siya, oh. Halata naman dyan yung straight line. Kasi yung isa, di ba, pa-diagonal, pa-slanting. So, ang nasa horizontal line ay yung straight line na siya. Horizontal line. Huwag niyong pipiliin yung slanting. Okay? Sa horizontal line of sight. Then, the next is the line of sight. Ang tinutukoy ditong line of sight is either the line of sight below or the line of sight above the observer. Okay. So, kung ito yung mata, this is the eye of the observer, automatic, etong isa ang magiging line of sight. Okay. So, that is OB. Magsisimula ulit tayo sa O. So, ray OB. Since pababa siya, that is line of sight below the observer. Nasa baba. But no need to specify. Lalagay lang dyan is OB. Ray OB. Okay. Then, next natin is angle. May dalawa tayo ditong pagpipilian. The angle of elevation and the angle of depression. Okay, sabi ko kanina, eto ang lagi nating reference. Yung horizontal line ang magiging reference. Tapos, titingnan natin yung isa pang line. Okay. Since pababa siya, nasa baba siya ng horizontal line of sight, then, etong angle na to ay magiging angle of depression. Etong angle na to, ang tawag dyan ay, ayan, angle of depression. So, ang pangalan ng angle na yan is angle AOB. So, that is the angle of depression. Pwede rin siyang pangalanan as angle BOA. So, kahit alin sa dalawa, angle AOB or angle BOA. So, yan ang ilalagay natin sa angle of depression kasi nasa baba siya. Okay. So, kung meron ditong line papunta dito sa taas, kung pataas, magkakaroon ng angle of elevation. Pero kung napapansin nyo, wala namang line dito, oh. Wala siyang line dito sa taas. Kaya, ang ilalagay nyo dito ay none. Meaning, walang angle of elevation. Okay, proceed na tayo sa ating example number 2. Okay, dito naman sa figure number 2, kung mapapansin mo, meron ditong bata or tao, tapos automatic, nandito yung mata niya, eyes. Kung mapapansin nyo din sa angle, yung vertex ay nandito. So, ito yung magiging eye ng tao. Tapos, nakatingin siya dun sa kite. Okay, nagpapalipad siya ng saranggola. So, yung kite, yung object na tinitingnan niya. Okay. So, since ito yung mata niya, there is that imaginary line papunta doon. Ka-level lang ng mata niya. For example, kung 6-footer siya, nasa 6 feet yung mata niya, etong point Y is 6 feet din above the ground. Okay. So, yung straight line na yan, na horizontal, straight line, automatic yan yung ating horizontal line of sight. Again, lagi tayo magsisimula doon sa may point na mata. So, OY. Kaya siya naging ray OY. Okay? Lagi magsisimula sa mata, ha? OY. Okay. Since eto na yung ating horizontal, automatic, yung isang line dyan, yan ang ating line of sight. So, that is OX. Ray OX. Magsisimula lagi sa mata. Okay. So, kung napapansin nyo, pataas siya doon, no? Nakatingin siya sa taas. Kasi yung object niya, which the kite, nasa taas siya. Kaya yan ay yung ating line of sight above the observer. Pero no need to put it in your answer sheet. Huwag nang ilalagay. Ilalagay lang dyan ay yung OX. Okay. Kung napapansin nyo again, eto yung horizontal. Tapos yung isang line nasa taas. So, ang angle na ma-form is angle of elevation. Kaya ito naman ngayon ang may sagot. Ito naman, angle of depression ang wala. So, none. So, ano yung pangalan ng angle na to? Itong na-form na to. So, that is angle XOY. Or pwede rin siyang pangalanan na YOX. Okay? Pareho lang yon. Angle XOY or angle YOX. So, yan ang ilalagay nyo dito. Okay? So, yun lang naman yung lesson natin for today. The difference between the angle of elevation and the angle of depression. Okay. So, sa mga sasagutan yung last, ito yung mga pointers na kailangan yung tandaan. First one, kailangan nyo munang ma-identify kung nasaan yung eye of the observer. Okay, yun muna yung i-identify nyo. Kasi kapag nakita nyo na yung location of the eye ng observer natin, makikita nyo naman kung alin doon yung horizontal straight line, tsaka kung alin doon yung diagonal na line. So, automatic yung straight line na horizontal, yun ang ilalagay nyo sa horizontal line of sight. And then, yung line na diagonal, yan naman ang ilalagay natin sa line of sight. Okay? So, that is all for week 3. For question, you can message me sa messenger. Okay? That's all for today.